Hi, I'm Shaunelle, and I am an untaxable wealth strategist. Now, the reason I have this podcast, which is crap, now what, is because I approach wealth strategies from a different angle. Wealth strategies, of course, talk about finances, which we will do that from time to time. And I also bring maybe kind of unusual, untraditional thoughts to how who we are, decisions that we've made play into our overall wealth as people. So, what does that mean for you? If this is your first time, I guarantee you're probably going to hear something that you probably have never exactly heard before, possibly from a whole different angle. If you're one of the thousands of clients that I've helped over the years, you probably will still learn something. So stick with me and we will dive into a different topic each week, a little bit deeper, and give you the opportunity to help guide what you would like to hear. What you will hear, I hope, and that will make sense to you. And as you get to know me, that I care not just about your money, but I also care about you and your family. That said, let's get into today's topic. Now, today's topic is about credit. Is poor credit also untapped wealth? That's the headline. I've got a ton of notes here about what we can talk about with credit. This is something that can be a million different directions. And it is something that is very unique. So I have a phrase that I use pretty regularly, and that phrase is that you have one life. You have one life and you have the opportunity to live that to your fullest. I have some version of that on a quote on Go Blazing Star, the website for my company. Along those same lines, when we talk about credit, we really only have one credit history, one credit history, one life, one credit score. So how do these things actually fold into our overall wealth strategy? There's a lot of different ways, actually. And a lot of people end up learning the hard way about decisions that can be made when they hit the fork in the road, when something unexpected happens. And so that's where we're going to unpackage this topic a little bit today. We're going to look at this from several different angles. I am not a credit expert, but I've been around a lot of people. I've helped clients that have needed to repair their credit. I have resources for helping people to repair their credit. And I have real world knowledge that I am going to at least share with you today. So, again, in that same spirit, that I care about having you be as knowledgeable as possible about topics, about resources, and how they can help you to ultimately have what I call the blazing star wealth strategies and eventually get yourself set up so that you can take advantage of ways to have untaxable wealth or untaxable retirement. So that said, let's talk a little bit about how important a credit score is, how important that plays in a person's life, and how we can get into this a little bit deeper and move ourselves into a better spot. A person can end up with poor credit for a lot of reasons. First of all, when we first get into life and we start making money, and we're starting to make purchases and maybe go off to school, we typically have what's called no credit. No credit isn't necessarily bad credit, it just means there's not a credit history. So that means making purchases, such as going to buy the first car, can be very difficult. Along those same lines, there are also things and practices in life that will impact when a person is about to try to build their credit. Americans in general are wired to constantly being paying debt. We're wired towards credit card usage. We're wired towards a car payment, a mortgage. We're constantly looking at our lives as payments. Can I afford this payment? How much can I afford? Can I live this lifestyle? Can I do these things? We're so often wired in that direction, more so in the direction than I would really like you to move towards being wired to, because there's a lot of less stress when there's financial freedom, and it helps to move you into enjoying some of the other financial advantages that you can enjoy if we're not wired towards payments. Having proper savings is really the first place to start. Saving up for the first car is really the place to start, but that's almost impossible for most people to do because vehicles have gotten so expensive. You can't even really get a good used car without getting into minimum, probably in the teens. So that's a 5-figure savings. That's a lot to try to save money for. So let's go back to establishing good credit. Establishing good credit is determining which is good payments and which ones are bad payments. Credit cards are typically considered bad payments. And the reason is not because they do contribute towards helping to establish credit. However, if we're constantly in a position where we're not paying off our credit card, then we're leaving money on the table and we're handing over extra money to the credit card company. That goes counter towards building wealth. Having a car in order to be able to go to a job, in order to make money, in order to get to college. Of course, so many things are online, but that's counter to this point, is a way to position yourself in a wealth position in the future, having education, having a job, making money, along those lines. What can happen very quickly for many people, especially if they didn't come from a household that had extra good money habits, is a very quick downturn. We talked in last week's episode about how a death of a significant other or a child, something that is particularly unexpected, can have devastating effects on the household. The same thing can happen from a lot of different directions overall financially. Continually looking towards and spending money that a person doesn't really have can be stressful on the budget. It can be stressful on the person, and it can ultimately lower a credit score. Let's talk about that just a little bit. When it comes to credit cards, your credit score reflects what percentage of your credit card line of credit you're using. If it's somewhere closer to that 10, 15, 20%, it's considered to be pretty reasonable. As credit card usage goes up and there's unpaid balances and there's a larger percentage that's being used, that pulls down the credit score. So what happens if your credit score is getting pulled down? Honestly, having been quite familiar with the car industry, if a credit score is even 650 or below, it's very difficult to be able to buy a car. If you have a low credit score, it affects what kind of interest rates that you're going to be offered for the vehicle, and then offered also, even it would play a role in your mortgage. And interest rates right now are quite high. They're starting to come down, be a little bit more competitive, but they're still higher than what most people like. The lower the credit score, raises what interest rates are offered by the banks or mortgage companies. And it can start a downward cycle. And I'm going to tell you what I mean by that. And this isn't meant to be doom and gloom, but sometimes habits that are not the best for finances, including higher credit card usage, unavoidably, in some cases, paying a higher mortgage or paying a larger interest rate on a car, those drain the budget, they affect the credit, and they can sometimes get a person on a slippery slope of where am I going to be and how am I going to get there? It sometimes leads to things like bankruptcy. It sometimes leads to the use of a reverse mortgage. It sometimes leads to debt consolidation. None of those are really our friend, to be honest. There are good reasons to have a bankruptcy. I get that. And there are different versions of bankruptcies, and people can recover from bankruptcies. We all know stories of politicians, business leaders who have come out of bankruptcy. We see it almost every day with retail chains filing bankruptcy protection, and then they end up getting back on the path again. So it's not necessarily all doom and gloom. I'm talking about the mental and the habits that go with, well, I can wipe the slate clean and then I can go back on. Well, not necessarily, because that bankruptcy follows you usually for at least 7 years, doesn't always erase all of the debt, and the repercussions of the interest rates that are offered because a person's coming out of a bankruptcy still does not necessarily fix and become a solution. Student debt. I know I'm leaping a little bit, but a lot of people have student debt. There's better student debt than other student debt. Again, let's get back into financial acumen. There are students that have funded all of their college. Some people have, like I said, good student debt, certain types of loans that are coming from the government loans, special loans that are lower interest or no interest, and special programs. And then there have been offers that are very much like putting your college career on a credit card. So there's always things to watch, whether you're watching the credit cards that you go ahead and apply for, whether it's got an introductory offer, whether it's got a higher interest rate or lower interest rate. Same thing can happen with student debt. Now, student debt, another very interesting topic. I'm going to touch on it because it plays a role on the ability to get a good deal on a mortgage. A mortgage loan resource, whether it's a bank or a mortgage company, they will look at student debt and the amount of student debt. And it can, like I said, negatively affect the ability to actually have a loan, which is very sad. After going to school, especially if you're a professional that has invested even as far as secondary education to a master's degree, making really pretty good money, you're paying your bills, you're doing all the things you can do, but then you suddenly hit a brick wall with the mortgage companies. So where am I going with all that? There needs to be more accountability in the education world to teach people real world finances. I took a class many years ago in high school. It didn't teach nearly the things that I've learned in life and the things that I've shared. If you're not seeing good patterns at home about how money is handled, then take the time to educate yourself so that you personally have better habits, so that as maybe you have a family or you're influencing nieces and nephews and other loved ones, that you're influencing them from a place of good habits. So let's talk about some of the best habits. The best habits are to have a budget. I have an amazing budget spreadsheet that I share with any of the clients that I work with that would like to learn how to handle their money better. And when we have and we handle the money better, we have the opportunity to start reallocating assets after we start paying off our debt in order to, again, get ourselves into some of these other wealth strategies that people who in the world are more familiar with. And what I want to say about that is that there are people who are surrounded by education, who've taken the time to educate themselves. They're more informed about the strategies that are available to them. They are approaching their future without having to look too close to today, but are making moves, maybe even making sacrifices for a better future in the long run. Because I'll just ask you, if you are listening and watching this, do you think taxes are going to go up or down? Do you think inflation is going to go up and down or down, excuse me? We know that once prices go up, yes, sometimes when we watch gas prices, they go up and they go down. They fluctuate up, they fluctuate down. That's a supply, clear supply and demand. But by and large, we don't see 32-cent a gallon gas like we did when I was growing up. That's just, once we've left that zone with any prices of anything, it doesn't really come back. It just kind of stays in there. So prices aren't going to necessarily go down. Taxes, that's a whole different subject, but taxes don't tend to go down. They tend to go up. We have some big changes coming up in 2025 about taxes. We're going to be losing our tax breaks. We are actually, it may not seem like it, but actually in one of the lowest periods of the world with taxes. So I am bringing this topic about having good credit, a good credit base, getting into good habits with having a budget that you actually follow, putting into place the idea that you don't spend what you don't have. You can reward yourself. You can do different things to keep feeling good about where you're at and give yourself little rewards, because if we deny ourselves, it makes it even harder to be committed to something. It's kind of like a diet. If we deny ourselves food, then we want that food even more. If we deny ourselves a trip, if we deny ourselves a new piece of clothing here and there, then we're just going to want more. And then once we start to go for more, we are maybe slightly more prone to swiping that credit card and buying it on credit. And then we ended up paying for that new coat, not just once, but twice, 3 times with the interest that we're paying on that. Putting away money for savings. Savings, 10% each paycheck is the ideal. Having 3 to 6 months of liquidity is very important. And it's very important because things happen. And again, back to that snowball. Once something bad kind of happens, it really does happen. I watched this happen. It can really snowball. So once something bad happens, it can really snowball. It all depends on the discipline, but if we get ourselves in a position where we're paying far too much for something, like I said, it impacts the budget, it impacts the overall financial situation, and it can continue to keep going along those lines. I met a couple once that had always lived within their means. They raised 5 children. They had a very nice house, not super nice, but one that was manageable. They had vehicles that they had paid for, that they had taken care of, and a storm came through. Storm came through their town, and it knocked over a tree on top of their vehicle. So suddenly they didn't have a vehicle. And when they didn't have a vehicle, they had to buy a new vehicle. They didn't have a lot of cash on hand. And here they were in their 70s, and they weren't able to get credit. It was very difficult for them to be able to finance a vehicle because they had done all the right things and they had paid in cash their whole life. So there is a balance between having credit and having good credit so that it's available to you when you need it, but not overusing and abusing it so that it is taking away. As I said, debt can be unwealth. It can be untapped wealth, because if you use your debt appropriately, it can lead and help you get to wealth. Let's go back to the rewards and giving yourself little gifts throughout life so that as you are making good plans, that you are rewarding yourself so that you don't feel like you're going without always. It's got a mind thing. If you feel like you don't have enough food, like I said, if you feel like you don't have some nice things that you can enjoy, then it plays to a potential downward spiral and takes us away from the places we can go. I did bring a book with me. It's probably going to look reverse on the screen, but this is Barbara from the Shark Tank. And I brought this book because when she first got into real estate, she was coming off of a really bad relationship, a really bad situation. And she didn't have any money. But she was bound and determined, and we all know where she ended up. She was bound and determined to make it into real estate and in one of the, okay, so Barbara, we all know where she landed. One of the top real estate salespeople, property managers in New York, and then on to very many other educational things along the way. When she didn't have two pennies to rub together and was restarting her life, she went out and bought one used coat. And that used coat was always complimented by people. It was a bright color. I can't remember if it was red or purple. I think it was red, actually. It's been a few years since I've actually read the book. But as I was preparing this topic and talking about why credit and why money and getting to wealth and how they all fit together, I thought about this because that coat gave her power. It gave her comfort. It gave her courage. It gave her bravery to go through everything she needed to go through for the days, weeks, months before she was really making money in real estate. And anybody who's ever been a part of real estate or any other really commission-based or small business owner, anything along those lines where somebody has taken a risk, you know, it's days, weeks, months before the money starts to come, before we've covered bills and expenses. So this was very inspiring to me for today's topic, because it's the little things that can carry us through, that can maybe keep us from drowning financially, because human nature is to want it all and want it all now, and to take that extra trip further away and to spend money on a full wardrobe instead of the one coat, and to use that credit card line of credit and to try to live the lifestyle we want to get to before we're really quite ready for it financially. Where we go from there. One of the things that is very important, and where we go from there is that the ultimate goal is to make it through those first years with minimal debt, live within our means, begin to have savings, have a plan for contingency if something happens, if were laid off or something along those lines, high medical bills. There are strategies to offset part of that within the financial services world. There are ways to help offset unexpected medical. There are ways to protect the family and the household from unexpected surprises, unexpected deaths. Yes, of course, I'm talking about where life insurance can fit in order to keep from devastating a household. Once that firm base and having that ability to pivot in case of something that's unexpected, then moving towards what are the next moves that I can make financially that are going to set me up for the future. Nobody wants to necessarily think about the future. We all want to live in the here and now. However, if that good planning is leveraged into future strategies that can allow us to enjoy a larger percent of our money, give less to the government in taxes, then these are things that you should know about. And in those cases, there are stages where we're doing OPM, using other people's money. There is good debt. I mentioned it even with some of the examples I gave earlier. If you're still listening, there is and there are good versions of debt. Some of the wealthiest people in this country know how to leverage other people's money. They're leveraging that money, they're accumulating good debt, reasonable debt, debt that's okay, there's nothing wrong with it, but they're using and leveraging that money for their future. I was not able to get my hands on my copy of Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad. But Rich Dad, Poor Dad is a very famous financial book. I encourage, for those of you who want to hear something about money with mindset and how somebody took the idea of a pretty coat and felt good and became confident and really made something happen of it. Of course, Barbara's book is a good one. Rich Dad, Poor Dad is another great book. It's a very easy read, and it's a comparison in his life with his dad and then the man that he saw as his father figure. His dad lived very traditionally, put himself in a position following pretty standard financial moves. The rich dad that was his father figure is the one who taught him amazing financial moves. If you Google the author, you will find out that he leverages debt. He's lived in debt most of his life, but he's yet wealthy. So we're going back to why and how the format of crap now what is different when we start talking about my strengths as an untaxable wealth strategist or untaxable retirement strategist, depending on where you are in your life. The idea is that everybody's different. The scenarios are different. The end game and the goals are typically very similar. The decisions that we make and the things that I'm sharing with you right now and imparting as much wisdom as I can to start a very strong foundation for the future. So as we wrap up this episode, here are the things that I want you to walk away with. There's 5 key things. The 5 things that I want you to take away and embrace. First of all, back to that one life. You have one life and you are the master of your money. I'm going to repeat that because many of us can identify with the idea that they might acquiesce to someone else that's a significant other and some of the financial decisions that are made on behalf of the household or possibly pressured into to make some decisions. You are the master of your own money. If it doesn't feel right, it's probably not right. If you're running around with a bucket in your hands, it's probably not right. Whole different subject, but you have one life, you have one financial history, and you could eventually be on your own holding the bucket. So keep in mind how important that strong history is, how important day-to-day decisions are. Do everything you possibly can not to live beyond your means. There is a very good class out there. It is Dave Ramsey's Financial Peace. Some churches offer it free. If you're finding yourself in debt, not understanding how to handle money, I encourage you to look into it. But I will tell you essentially what it teaches. It teaches an envelope system where the paycheck is pretty much cashed into cash, because mentally it's harder to hand over cash than it is to have a credit card swiped or a debit card swiped. So it causes us one more step before we make a purchase. And if we're setting aside $150 a month for car insurance, for that $900 semi-annual payment, and we've got it all set aside so that when that payment comes due, the cash is already there. Those are some of the principles that are taught. And it also teaches a debt snowball, how to swipe at debt, and then how to move to the point where you're debt free. First of all, try not to live beyond your means. You get yourself into a position where you need more information. There are resources out there. And I do like that program, but I probably just saved you time and money by telling you the tips on that. Surround yourself with good influences. That includes the people that you are surrounded with and the stuff you're surrounded with. Put yourself in a position, like I said, where you don't feel without, that you have something that makes you feel good. Having a life in disarray with the people that we're around and the things that we are around, if we have stacks and stacks of unopened mail, if we have areas that we've not cleaned up, if we haven't unpacked our boxes, those are things that can make us feel like we don't have control. Keep yourself in control as much as possible and surround yourself with good influences. And if the influences aren't good, start looking at ways to get yourself out of there. Save 10%. Save 10% or more. Make sure you're saving at minimum 3 months liquidity. Anybody who went through COVID had to find a new job. 6 months of liquidity would have been amazing. I'm sure almost everybody would agree, but at least 3 months handy. And always be evaluating. Always be looking to see if you accidentally hit Google Play and you just paid $4.99 for another subscription you don't need, or accidentally rented a video on your smart TV and now you're getting charged every month from that particular resource or that subscription. $5 is $5, $10 is $10. $1,000 is $1,000. The more we're watching every one of those pennies and constantly evaluating, the better off we are, and the longer we will be able to enjoy our dollars, and the more likely you will be to live a life that you feel wealthy. Wealthy in people that you're surrounded with, wealthy with your dollars, the ability to go and do things, to share things with your family. And that's exactly what I want for you. If you like what I shared with you today and you want to hear more, please follow the subscription. Look for me on socials under Blazing Star. I am excited to share with you too that I expand on some of these topics that I'm sharing with you on this podcast in a workshop format. So if you happen to be in the Wichita area, I will be hosting a special topic on Social Security in retirement. It's not very exciting for almost everyone, but those of us that are in our 50s are probably shocked that we're actually going to possibly get some Social Security in retirement, because we used to hear 20, 30 years ago it might not be around. But fortunately, our government has decided to continually go into debt in order to keep Social Security around. But that's another whole topic. Anyway, Wichita, June 24th and 25th at the Advanced Learning Library, just on the outskirts of downtown. Gorgeous building. Also, I have in plans to be in Arkansas in mid-July. That event is under planning with my team. This will be a women in wealth topic. So those are two upcoming workshops, and keep watching my website, Go Blazing Star, because many of these things are going to be posted up there, as well as the workshops and the details for the events. If you have a request, if you happen to think that you have an event that you'd like me to be involved in, I am more than happy to be involved in something from a remote or possibly in-person standpoint. I have offices in Omaha and Wichita currently, and I am planning a soon on-demand version of many of my workshops. In the meanwhile, Google anything with Blazing Star, follow me on the socials, go to goblazingstar.com, and I look forward to visiting with you again next week.